My name is Francis Saa-Dittoh. I'm from Ghana. I work with the University for Development Studies. My research is basically on looking at the internet. One thing I consider a problem with the internet, and that is inclusivity. There are a lot of people around the world that are not included in this thing we call internet because basically they don't have access to it. Even if we were to provide all the infrastructure available, we still have people around the world who would not be able to understand the content on the internet, primarily because it's not in their language and they don't read and write, and it becomes impossible for them to benefit from the internet. And so my research is looking at how do we leverage on artificial intelligence, and primarily that is machine learning and natural language processing, to make sure that we can basically convert information either from the internet or from elsewhere into formats that rural areas and people who are not literate in English can understand. Because this is action research, we actually started from the community. Funny enough, most of the ideas that I'm mentioning comes from community members. Sometimes we feel that people in rural communities who don't have access to technology don't understand what they want or what they can get. But we realize that that is completely false. And when we speak to them, they know exactly what they want. They know exactly how best they can get the information. They know that they need information. They know that they want to share information, and so they're actually very eager for something like this. Luckily, over the years, at least a lot of people, even in rural areas, have had some experience with digital devices, and so it's not totally new. The newest part is the concept of a computer speaking back to you in your own language. That is a bit strange, but also welcoming, because hearing your own language is always nice, it's always good, and so it's very welcoming. Well, so heritage-wise, of course, it's important to maintain our history. It's never a good idea to lose any information. Even if these languages are dying off, if we don't get to a stage where they are digital, then we lose the language as less and less people speak. But if we build these systems, then this language will live on forever, even if no one speaks it, because it will always be in a digital space. But the other side to it is that for most rural areas in the global south, the literacy rate is almost constant, and it's almost a constant low, because anyone who gets literate basically does a rural-urban migration. And so we are almost always left with rural folk in rural communities. And so if we don't work on their languages, it means, and we expect that they would learn a foreign language, then it will probably never happen. Because as people get educated, they gradually move away from the rural areas, and we're always left with the illiterate in the rural area, and they need information. They need to be able to get new ideas about farming, to be able to share their ideas about farming. Indigenous knowledge gets lost along the way, and we lose a lot. And so it's advantageous to us and also to them. The information that will be shared on a system like this is not up to us. Basically, for example, Sir Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web, but he never determined what information would be shared on it. In the same way we build a system, it's not our place to decide what information would be shared on it. It's the place of the community members. What they say they want is what should be shared on it. And definitely they are in communication with each other. They are in communication with NGOs and with stakeholders and with institutions who provide information. And together, these are the people who decide what information should be shared on the system. And for the technical people, we stay out of it. What we call the colonized internet basically is an internet that is geared towards the West or the global North. If you go online and you check the languages that are available online, both in text and in audio, you're going to find probably English would be the most, maybe followed by Mandarin or Cantonese, Spanish and French. And these are the languages you may find, but you would not find languages like Dagbani or Frafra. The languages I mentioned are not even known to you at all, and that exactly is the problem. And this research seeks to change the internet in a way, and by moving away from that colonized aspect where it's kind of structured for one particular kind of user, primarily the global north user, and make it more accessible to people who are not in the global north and the global south and have a completely different context. So of course, without the research grant, this would have been very difficult because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. It's not just about the technical work, it's about a lot of context. There's a lot to understand before we can go on to even build the technical parts. The global south, and especially the rural areas of the global south, are very contextual, and it may not work well when you build technologies like the way big tech does, because if it's not relevant to the users, then they wouldn't use it. So there's a lot of work that goes in. There's a lot of field visits. There's a lot of collaborative workshops that are required, and without ISOC Foundation grants, it would have probably been impossible to do this. Well, my advice to anyone who wants to get, who has research and wants to get into this would be to, well, sit down and look at your research well. Yes, you have an idea, and technical people, we are very outspoken about our ideas, but sometimes we need to actually sit down, put them on paper, look at them very well, because it has to be evaluated and others have to understand what you're doing to be able to fund you. If they don't get an aspect of what you're trying to do, then it will be difficult for them to give you the funding to do it. And so you'll have to break it down and put it in a sense where they get a feel of what you know, what you're trying to do, how you're going to do it, what the deliverables are going to be, and what the steps are going to be. And when you can outline these things well, then you have started the process. And by what I have seen of the foundation, once you start this process, they will help you to get there.